When you think of silence in a relationship or dating scenario, it's easy to assume it means disinterest, punishment, or emotional detachment. But in truth, silence, when used intentionally, is one of the most powerful tools you have. It's not about creating distance for the sake of drama. It's about creating space for clarity, self-respect, and mystery. When you understand this, you stop fearing silence and start wielding it with confidence. Most people are used to noise. They're used to chasing after validation, explaining themselves, over-texting, oversharing, and trying to fill every gap with attention just to feel secure. But here's what happens when you always rush in to fill that silence. You rob the other person of the opportunity to fill your absence, to question what's going on in your mind, or to wonder what they might lose if they don't show up for you properly. When you think of silence in a relationship or dating scenario, it's easy to assume it means disinterest, punishment, or emotional detachment. But in truth, silence, when used intentionally, is one of the most powerful tools you have. It's not about creating distance for the sake of drama. It's about creating space for clarity, self-respect, and mystery. When you understand this, you stop fearing silence and start wielding it with confidence. Most people are used to noise. They're used to chasing after validation, explaining themselves, over-texting, oversharing, and trying to fill every gap with attention just to feel secure. But here's what happens when you always rush in to fill that silence. You rob the other person of the opportunity to fill your absence, to question what's going on in your mind, or to wonder what they might lose if they don't show up for you properly. You take away the intrigue, you remove the sense of value that comes with emotional presence, because if you're always available, always responding, always there, you become background noise instead of something worth turning toward. Silence doesn't mean vanishing or cutting someone off. It means knowing when to hold back. It means choosing not to react instantly when you're triggered. It means letting your energy speak louder than your words. For example, if someone pulls away or goes cold, your instinct might be to run toward them, trying to fix it or regain connection. But what if you didn't? What if instead you stayed still? You chose to stay soft, quiet, and calm. You let the silence linger, not as punishment, but as protection for your peace. That alone makes a man take notice. When you do this, you disrupt the usual dynamic he's familiar with, as he's used to women over-explaining, getting emotional, trying to decode his every move. But here you are, present but not pressing, interested but not chasing. That creates a shift. He begins to wonder, why isn't she reacting? That question alone becomes a spark, and the spark is what drives pursuit. There's something powerful about a woman who doesn't feel the need to prove her value. When she can sit in silence, not coldly, but confidently, it shows emotional maturity. It shows strength. It tells a man, I'm not here to force anything. I invite connection, but I don't beg for it. That message, unspoken, lands deeper than any speech you could ever give, because it's not just heard, it's felt. Men are often most drawn to the woman who knows how to be quiet in chaos. Not silent in a bitter way, but in a self-possessed way. When you don't react impulsively to his silence or mixed signals, you show him that your emotional world doesn't revolve around him. You show that you're not waiting by the phone, not anxiously attaching yourself to every message or moment. That's rare, and rare gets noticed. Some women think if they're not constantly engaging, they'll be forgotten. But the opposite is often true. The more you engage from a place of anxiety, the more you train him to take your presence for granted. But when you're silent at the right moments, when you stop rewarding inconsistent behavior with consistent attention, you become a mystery. And mystery is magnetic. This doesn't mean you never express yourself. It doesn't mean playing games or being emotionally unavailable. It means knowing the difference between responding from your wounds and responding from your worth. It means holding space for yourself. Long the manipulation, you shift everything. You stop being reactive and start being magnetic. You create space for the right energy to come toward you. Not out of pressure, but because you've become someone worth pursuing. Not loud, not needy, just powerful in your presence. That's how silence, when used wisely, becomes the most attractive thing in the room. Softness is so often misunderstood. In a world that praises loudness, bold declarations, and constant activity, softness can be mistaken for weakness. But true softness, intentional softness, is a quiet power. It's not about shrinking yourself, suppressing your feelings, or being overly agreeable. It's about knowing exactly who you are and choosing not to let the chaos of others disrupt your peace. A woman who embodies softness doesn't react to every provocation. She's not easily rattled, and she doesn't. The manipulation, you shift everything. You stop being reactive and start being magnetic. You create space for the right energy to come toward you. Not out of pressure, but because you've become someone worth pursuing. Not loud, not needy, just powerful in your presence. That's how silence, when used wisely, becomes the most attractive thing in the room. Softness is so often misunderstood. In a world that praises loudness, bold declarations, and constant activity, softness can be mistaken for weakness. But true softness, intentional softness, is a quiet power. It's not about shrinking yourself, suppressing your feelings, or being overly agreeable. It's about knowing exactly who you are and choosing not to let the chaos of others disrupt your peace. A woman who embodies softness doesn't react to every provocation. She's not easily rattled, and she doesn't need to dominate a room to feel significant. Her presence is felt in the way she carries herself, in the calm she brings when she enters a space, and in the way she listens more than she speaks. That doesn't make her passive, it makes her powerful. In relationships, softness creates contrast. When you're soft in your energy, it allows him to step into his masculine energy and feel safe doing so. Not because you're beneath him, but because you're not competing for control. You're allowing space for connection to unfold naturally. This energy says, I know my value, I don't need to convince you of it. And that's magnetic. Softness is the opposite of desperation. It doesn't chase or cling. It doesn't try to win affection. Instead, it invites, it attracts, it creates space. Think of how different that feels from the usual pattern of pushing, pulling, analyzing. In fact, she often has the clearest ones. But instead of shouting them, she simply lives them. If someone disrespects her time, she doesn't explode, she exits. If someone plays games, she doesn't retaliate, she removes herself. That is the essence of high self-worth. Calm decisions, quiet clarity. And in that softness, something shifts in the dynamic. He starts paying closer attention. He feels a difference. He can sense that she's not dependent on his response to validate herself. And that alone pulls him closer. Because in a world full of people trying to prove something, she's simply being. When you embrace softness, you don't have to force connection. You don't have to beg to be seen. You become the kind of woman who is unforgettable. Not because she demanded attention, but because she radiated presence. There's an allure in a woman who is both strong and soft. One who doesn't need to match masculine energy to be powerful. Your softness allows him to feel masculine, not in a controlling or dominant way, but in a way that invites him to protect, pursue, and provide. He wants to step up for a woman who brings peace, not pressure. And when he senses that your softness is rooted in strength, not weakness, he respects it even more. It shows him that you're choosing to be open, not because you can't be hard, but because you don't want to be. That's a conscious choice, and men feel that. A woman who leads with softness doesn't fear being overlooked because she knows that the right person will be drawn to her energy, not her volume. She doesn't need to prove herself or fight for her place in someone's life. She knows that her presence is the invitation. And if someone can't recognize that, they were never meant to stay. In fact, she often has the clearest ones. But instead of shouting them, she simply lives them. If someone disrespects her time, she doesn't explode, she exits. If someone plays games, she doesn't retaliate, she removes herself. That is the essence of high self-worth. Calm decisions, quiet clarity. And in that softness, something shifts in the dynamic. He starts paying closer attention. He feels a difference. He can sense that she's not dependent on his response to validate herself. And that alone pulls him closer. Because in a world full of people trying to prove something, she's simply being. When you embrace softness, you don't have to force connection. You don't have to beg to be seen. You become the kind of woman who is unforgettable. Not because she demanded attention, but because she radiated presence. There's an allure in a woman who is both strong and soft. Soft doesn't mean naive. It doesn't mean letting things slide or settling for less. It means knowing your worth so deeply that you don't need to shout about it. You let your energy do the talking, and in doing so, you create a space where real connection can flourish. In the end, it's not about being less than, quieter than, or smaller than. It's about being so secure in who you are that you don't need to armor up. Your softness becomes your strength. And that, more than anything, is what makes you unforgettable and irresistible. Mystery is one of the most powerful forces in attraction. It's not about playing games or being intentionally difficult. It's about allowing space. Space for curiosity, space for pursuit. When someone can't immediately figure you out, when you don't rush to reveal everything about yourself, you become a presence that lingers in their mind long after you've left the room. Too often in the early stages of connection, people feel the need to overshare. They give too much, too soon. They lay all their cards on the table, hoping that total transparency will speed up intimacy. But intimacy that is rushed is rarely real. It's not earned. It hasn't been built through trust, through mutual effort, through the unfolding that happens naturally over time. When you give everything away up front, there's nothing left to discover. And when there's nothing left to discover, there's nothing left to chase. What makes someone irresistible is not just their looks, charm, or words. It's the emotional experience they create. And mystery is a huge part of that experience. It leaves someone wondering, Watch your thinking. It makes them imagine what it would feel like to know you more deeply. It inspires them to move toward you, to ask questions, to spend more time. It turns ordinary moments into intrigue. Think about it. When someone is always available, always responding immediately, always revealing every thought, it creates comfort, yes, but too much comfort too soon can kill curiosity. That's when interest fades, because there's no journey, no tension, no wondering. Everything is already out in the open, and what once felt exciting now just feels predictable. Mystery, on the other hand, keeps energy alive. It keeps the other person leaning in. It's not about being distant or detached. It's about having a strong enough sense of self that you don't feel the need to be fully seen in one conversation. You're not rushing to impress. You're letting them discover you piece by piece. And that discovery creates the feeling of progress. It makes them feel like they're earning access to you, not being handed it for free. You don't have to tell your life story on the first date. You don't have to explain every decision, every emotion, every intention. You don't have to text back instantly every time. When you take a moment before you respond, when you pause, reflect, and engage with intention, it shows that you value your energy. It shows that you're not just reacting, you're responding with awareness. And that slight delay, that moment of space, it creates a ripple. They start wondering, what is she thinking? Or why hasn't she answered yet? It creates presence through absence. You are still in the room with them, even when you're not physically there. That is the power of mystery. It extends your impact. It's easy to think that if you're not constantly communicating, you'll lose someone's interest. But if someone's interest is only maintained through non-stop interaction, it's not real interest. Real attraction is sustained by emotional depth, by contrast, and by the sense that there's more to learn, more to feel, more to explore. And mystery feeds that sense of more. You can be warm, open, and inviting and still be mysterious. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Mystery isn't coldness, it's selectiveness. It's knowing when to speak and when to hold, when to lean in and when to lean back. It's trusting that if someone is truly invested, they will come closer without being pushed. They will ask the deeper questions. They will want to know more, not because you're dangling yourself like bait, but because your energy naturally inspires curiosity. This is especially true with men. When a woman is a little hard to read, when she holds something back, when she's not all over the place emotionally, it draws him in. It wakes up his desire to pursue. It makes him feel like there's a challenge, but not the exhausting kind, the kind that energizes, the kind that feels like, she's not just anyone, I want to figure her out. When you hold something sacred, your time, your thoughts, your heart, it forces him to earn his way in. And when he earns it, he values it. And that's the difference between fleeting attraction and deep investment. So no, you don't have to overshare to be loved. You don't have to be fully available to be respected. You don't have to reveal everything to be seen. In fact, the opposite is often true. When you leave a little space, when you keep a little mystery, when you don't rush into emotional exposure, you give someone the gift of discovery, and in doing so, you become unforgettable. There is something deeply magnetic about a woman who leads with feminine energy, especially when she does it with quiet confidence and emotional intelligence. Feminine energy isn't about being submissive or passive. It's about presence, receptivity, softness, and grace. When paired with a sense of self-worth and clear boundaries, it becomes a powerful force that naturally inspires a man to pursue, protect, and prove himself worthy of being close to her. A woman rooted in her feminine doesn't chase love, she attracts it. She's not operating from fear or desperation. She isn't constantly asking where things are going, trying to earn affection, or seeking reassurance at every step. Instead, she allows herself to be seen without forcing anything. She creates space for the relationship to come to her, not because she's playing hard to get, but because she knows what she deserves and is willing to be patient for it. This kind of energy speaks volumes. It tells a man, you're welcome here, but you must meet me where I am. She's open, but she's not going to lower her standards or compromise her values just to be chosen. That combination of warmth and self-respect challenges him in the best way. It calls him to rise. Men are biologically and emotionally wired to pursue what feels valuable. When something feels earned, it becomes more meaningful. And a woman who stands in her feminine energy, who knows how to be silent when needed and soft without surrendering her power, becomes a rare kind of woman. She doesn't need to assert dominance or match his energy to get attention. She simply holds her ground in a way that invites him to come closer. This doesn't mean playing games or withholding affection. It's about embodying your worth so fully that you don't have to ask for effort. You inspire it. When he senses that your world isn't built around him, that you have a full, rich life with or without his validation, it challenges him, not in a way that makes him feel lesser, but in a way that makes him want to step up. It pushes him to wonder, how do I keep this woman interested? How do I make her feel seen, safe, and chosen? And the answer isn't found in anything loud or dramatic. It's in the subtle, powerful presence of a woman who knows herself. She doesn't need to over-explain her needs. She communicates clearly and calmly. She doesn't blow up when something goes wrong. She observes, she steps back when necessary, not to punish but to protect her peace. She knows her value, and because of that, she doesn't beg for attention. She receives it. This kind of woman is different, and men feel it. They may not always be able to explain it, but they'll remember how she made them feel. Inspired, intrigued, challenged, in a way that awakens something primal. The desire to pursue, to prove, to win her over, not because she demanded it, but because her energy invited it. Feminine energy, when expressed with emotional maturity, doesn't weaken a woman, it elevates her. It brings out her intuition, her calm, her softness, and her strength. It creates an atmosphere where a man can feel safe being in his masculine. He can take initiative, plan, lead, and provide. And she can receive without guilt, without needing to control everything. That harmony is what creates deep, lasting attraction. It's also what makes her unforgettable. Because while others may be chasing, explaining, or performing, she's simply being. She doesn't need to constantly reach out or ask where she stands. Her stillness says it all. I don't chase love, I attract it. And if this isn't aligned, I'll be okay. When a woman holds herself in this way, it's not just attractive. It's rare. It breaks patterns. It stands out. Because it's not a show, it's not something she turns on and off, it's who she is. A woman in her feminine energy trusts that what's meant for her will come, not because she sat back and hoped, but because she aligned herself with the energy of grace, power, and peace. And in that space, he can feel her. He can feel the pull. He can feel the kind of connection that doesn't come from words alone, but from presence. From the way she makes him feel when she says nothing at all. That's the power of feminine energy, not as a tactic, but as a way of being that transforms how she's pursued, how she's treated, and how she's remembered.